All right, welcome back to this week's very windy yet beautifully sunny walk and talk. We are at the ocean here. We're at Langness, which many of you may know because Jeremy Clarkson used to have a house here, Langness Lighthouse. But we have got some wild news this week. It's actually been a really strange news week, to be honest. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, this is the weekly walk and talk where I sort of summarize a lot of the important news from the week to save you hours of watching boring propagandist mainstream media news. So that's what this video is all about. But yeah, it's been a strange week. You've probably noticed this as well. Not really a lot has happened. It feels like the calm before the storm. But actually things have been going on behind the scenes this week with different countries. And I would describe it more as a consolidation phase before we go into the next wave of craziness. But there was some really weird things that happened this week. So weird, in fact, that I don't even know how to describe them. I'm going to save them till the end of the video. One involving King Charles. This one's super weird, so we'll get to that at the end. But let's start with the biggest stories then. And one of them is that Rishi Sunak, UK Prime Minister, flew out to the US to see Biden to reaffirm their special relationship. That's what it reminds me of. Renewed their vows, it even said. It's like a wedding or something. It's so weird. And even when they met, I thought they were going to hug it out or something. It was just so strange seeing Sunak and Biden come together. Very weird. But they said the move comes as a way to strengthen their ties and their beautiful special relationship. Oh gosh. Against the threat of Russia and the emerging threat of China that must be dealt with. That's what they say. But Biden also asked Congress to class the UK as a domestic entity for their weapons manufacturing companies or industry. I thought that was really strange, actually. So the UK arms industry, weapons industry, has the same classification of the US industry. So those companies in the US that had an advantage because they're domestic, now the UK also has that same advantage in the US. So they are classed now as, or it's about to be passed, they're going to be classed as a domestic entity to supply military equipment. And I thought the other thing was really strange was the way Sunak, and I don't say the British people because it's just one man, he keeps doubling down on all the, the Ukraine stuff. And he said that they're going to, or the UK military is going to be training 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers by the end of this year. And I thought it was strange the way they keep saying that, this war's going to be over very shortly and Ukraine's going to be victorious and all this sort of thing. I don't know. I find the whole thing very weird. The other agreement they made was around technology. So they've agreed to restrict technology access to unfriendly countries. I thought it was strange they used that word because that's the same term that Russia uses. Russia calls, the UK or the US or some other countries unfriendly countries. So they use that same term, which I thought was strange. But they didn't use the word China very much, but you could tell that what they were talking about, this threat, this big emerging threat that has to be dealt with, whether that's militarily, which I thought was strange they used that word, or otherwise, they can't really deal with China. I think that's the main thing to look at here, because our economies are just so ingrained with one another. We really do have a global trade system now. And actually the US has got a massive trade deficit, by the way. And it got even, I think this was one of the worst months on record just recently as well. So this trade deficit is getting worse for the US. Not that it really makes that much difference when the US has the reserve currency, but it's still a point worth noting. And Germany is about to host the biggest NATO air deployment ever in history. In fact, it's so big that it's going to take 11 days to play out this air exercise. And even Sweden has been invited, and they're going to be joining in. So has Japan been invited. Japan are also getting involved. And I thought that was interesting. I doubt China is going to like that Japan is getting involved in this exercise. Hello. I've just made a new friend here. Now, the next story really made me laugh, and that is that the UAE oil chief has been listed as the perfect candidate to lead, you know, this COP28 and all the climate stuff. And I thought it was really funny because there's been this massive backlash this week over his selection. Everyone's like, huh? Sorry, the oil chief of the UAE is going to be in charge of climate-based stuff and reducing fossil fuels. That makes no sense. So I've got to read out the response from COP28. Okay, here's the statement. Dr. Sultan is a climate champion and a perfect person for the role. What? Sorry, what? I mean, I don't know who this Dr. Sultan is, so I can't really comment on him. But if he is the chief of oil and he's going to be doing this role as well for climate-based stuff, how does that make any sense whatsoever? It really is, you know, George Orwell's 1984, is that they make, you know, the statements now that we keep seeing are the strangest thing ever. In fact, they're so strange that rather than addressing the point, they just double down on the absurdity. So obviously there's a conflict of interest, and they say, rather than actually commenting on that, they just double down and say, oh yeah, he's the perfect candidate, he's great. Now, I wanted to show you this tower a second. Let me just get out the sun a moment here. Okay, here it is. Because there was a lot of comments on this tower the last time I walked here. And I'll just show you inside as well, actually. There it is. That's a staircase going right the way to the top. And there's Jeremy Clarkson's old house. He doesn't live there now, obviously. He has his own farm. Now, I don't know if you've seen what's going on in the US and Canada at the moment. This was a bizarre one. There are these huge, enormous wildfires. And I mean just unbelievably big wildfires. I had not even heard about this. I didn't see it on the news. I didn't see it on the US and Canadian news that I follow. So I was quite surprised I had to get this from an Indian news network who reported on it. But these fires are enormous. But the one thing that does annoy me with a lot of this reporting now is that any time you see a big storm or a wildfire, or it doesn't matter what it is, anything at all, they come out with this massive thing about climate change. It's always the same every single time. And they say, you know, this new storm proves, you know, climate stuff. And the other one that they said, I want to read this statement out because I wrote it down. Yeah, here it is. They said that climate change had resulted in extreme sea level rises this year. That is complete lie. It's a complete nonsense, BS, whatever you want to say. This sort of stuff really annoys me because a lot of people are so stupid that they honestly believe that this year, in the last 12 months, that sea levels have seen an extreme rise. What is that? 1,000th of a millimeter or something? What is this extreme rise? Sea levels take so long to actually rise, it's ridiculous. But the problem is no one actually studies any of this stuff anymore. No one looks at this meteorological data and looks at, well, how many storms did there used to be? How many storms are there now? What was the sea level used to be? What was the temperatures used to be? So some of this stuff does really annoy me. But at the same time, I think they've really polarized people, because for me, the things that annoy me are not the things that annoy other people. Like for me, what annoys me is the amount of pollution that a lot of the, you know, big industries, shall we say, are allowed to just dump into the atmosphere, or the pollution that they put into the rivers. You can see it for yourself. I know when I was a kid, the rivers were so clean. And now that some of these rivers are absolutely filthy, full of crap and shopping trolleys and traffic cones and all sorts of things, because no one really cares anymore. And that's the sad thing. That's why I love this island here, because people really care, and they care about the environment. And I mean that in a different way when I say care about the environment. I mean, we all care about it in terms of deforestation, wildlife, water quality, air quality, things like that. And these are the things that people should be focusing on. And yet, what are they focusing on? They're focusing on extreme sea level rises, which do not exist. Honestly, because I know some of you actually believe this stuff. Do me a favor, just look up the data for yourself, because the last time I posted this data, I had all these people that just said, oh, well, I don't believe it. Was this peer reviewed? What was the source? What was the source of this? And it's like, I'm just not even going to get into it all. It's pointless trying to argue some of these points, even though this data has been out for, I mean, it goes back Greenland ice cores and all sorts of things, but it doesn't make any difference. Some people just will not believe it. But yet they love living in a concrete jungle, and they don't care when all these forests are taken down and everything else. It's baffling to me. But anyway, let's move on to the next story. HSBC, this is very interesting. The bank has just pulled their mortgage range for new customers. And that's interesting because I was only talking about this on yesterday's video, that I thought we would see more mortgage companies pulling their products. And then we've just seen this announced this morning. So I thought that was very, very interesting indeed. So what did they say the reason is? They want to consolidate their funds, and they're worried about liquidity issues. They say not us as a bank, of course. Oh, no. But, you know, the industry as a whole, they're worried about liquidity. So they want to just consolidate and just focus on their existing customer base, which makes sense. I would do the exact same thing in that situation. When you come into hard times, the only time you would want to risk capital in growth is if you're absolutely certain that your business expansion is going to work. Otherwise, you just want to consolidate, cut down all the expenses, cut down all the... It's just like a family budget, really. What do? You cut down expenses, you cut down the costs. Whoa, this is wobbly, and there's barbed wire right between my legs here. Do you see that? Look how wobbly that was. Barbed wire right between my legs. Another story just out this week then was the Hilton in San Francisco, 1,921 rooms, so almost 2,000 rooms. They have just walked away from the building, i.e. they have abandoned that building. Just think how much that's worth, and they've just walked away from it. They've abandoned it. And you've seen a lot of this in San Francisco. And I know sometimes you don't like it when my forecasts are right. I get it from all the people, you know, in San Francisco. They don't like my forecasts, and they hated my forecasts 2-3 years ago when I said all this was going to come, because it's very simple economics. You look at where the money is flowing, you look at where the jobs are flowing, and that therefore dictates where property prices will fall as those jobs move. And it's not just residential, it's commercial as well. So we're seeing the commercial wave now. 1/3 of office buildings in San Francisco are now empty, and Wells Fargo just sold their tower there. And unbelievably, they sold it for 71% below the asking price. That is absurd, but that is what they just did. Another big article this week then is how the banks are delivering what we talked about last year when I said that we would see this. I think people are now calling it Operation Choke Point 2.0. I mean, I didn't call it that at the time, but we'll go with that. And what they're doing, I talked more about on-ramps and off-ramps. So I said that the way they're going to choke the crypto market is they're going to just destroy these on-ramps into the crypto platforms. Because if you can't put fiat currency into the platforms, finally, we've got a windbreak here. I can actually hear myself speak. It's always windy over there on the coast. But yeah, if you cut the funding to the crypto platforms, the fiat currency, then there's just no possible way that the cryptos can continue to grow with retail payments up dead end. I don't fancy walking through all the gorse. It's a little bit sharp. But yeah, this is to be expected at the moment. They've got to cut off this income flow into the crypto market ready for next year, 2024, which is probably when we're going to see the next bull run begin. So that's the most likely time to see this occur. So they've got to cut off all these inflows now, because otherwise it's going to be a competitor to their CBDC, their central bank digital currency, and they do not like that at all. Up the wind's back. Now, this was a strange story that I read this week, and it's about the UK. So they're about to close 90 schools. I think it's like 88 to 90 schools are about to be closed because they say, and I quote, "There's just no pupils."
More than 90 primary schools in England are set to close or risk closure because, well, most of them, they're empty due to the decreasing birth rates and the migration of families to urban areas.
Now, I very much doubt there's no pupils, but I thought it was interesting that they actually went into details on why there's no pupils, and some of the stuff is quite controversial stuff, so I was surprised that they listed this in the article. And the more controversial stuff, actually there's even more controversial stuff that they didn't list, but they were talking about, you know, the basic stuff such as people during lockdowns and things, they moved out of the cities, they went more rural. They talked about how couples are having less children now and things like that. But what they didn't mention was in the last 2 years, the amount of stillbirths and miscarriages and things like that that have also affected. And also things like these new studies on birth control and things like that that women have been taking for, gosh, what, 20 years or more than that now. I'm not actually sure because I'm not a woman, I've never taken it. But there's a lot of studies into, you know, all this birth control pills that people have been taking for a long time and now are really struggling, women, to get pregnant. But it's not just that. You've got to think about pollution. We just mentioned that earlier. You've got to think about the water supply. You've got to think about food now. We're just living in this very, very polluted environment, combined with a propaganda environment telling you you don't need to have kids, it's better not to have kids. Oh, the family unit is a right wing. What do they call it now? The family unit. Oh gosh, they're just going after the family unit. But that's mainly only in Western countries. You go elsewhere around the world and it's not under attack. But I've got to tell you let's get on to the craziest stories that I saw this week. I really don't know how to explain this one. I'm going to wait for you to leave the comments on it. King Charles, here we go, visits the Romanian village of Viscri in Transylvania. Okay, yeah, you can see where this is going. Where he owns a property. Okay, why does he own this little property in Transylvania? That's strange. He says this is due to proudly tracing his roots back to Vlad the Impaler. That's what it actually says. It says Vlad the Impaler. King Charles sees the fearsome ruler as a national hero to this day due to his fierce, albeit tyrannical, defense against the country's enemies. It gets worse, it gets worse. This is an actual story, by the way. Vlad was often referred to as Dracula, which translates to the devil's son, a moniker now more commonly associated with the world's most famous vampire. Under Vlad's orders, enemies were said to have been burned alive, skinned, roasted, and decapitated. It gets worse, it gets worse. You know, turn the sound off if you don't want to hear the next bit. In one particularly horrifying story, it said one man was boiled in water and his remains force-fed to his family. Now, what? Seriously, what the heck? Why is this story in the mainstream media? Do you not think that is the freakiest, most weird story you've ever heard? Why is King Charles? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it, but maybe I just can't figure this one out. So please drop in the comments what the heck is going on there, because that one just that baffles me. Now, there was another story that came directly after this, which was just as weird. This lady set up a one of those trap cams basically. I've got one on my property. She set up a trap cam because there was a deer carcass. You know, it was like dead deer rotting away. And no joke, in the middle of the night, two women that looked like witches, I don't know if they were naked or half naked, came and started eating the carcass. What the heck? I mean, why are these stories in mainstream media right now? That is just freaky. That is so weird.
Our next story is bizarre to say the least, and will leave you scratching your heads, wondering what's really going on. What did they see? Apparently, women eating the deer carcass. You heard that right. They did not seem to have clothes on.
I really don't know what the world is coming to when we keep getting news like this. It is, I don't know. I find it strange. But anyway, we've got to end with a funny one because we can't end on that. That was horrifying. Let's end with a funny one then. Jack Daniels has just won a lawsuit against Ban Spaniel's old number 2 on the carpet dog toy. So Jack Daniels just did a lawsuit against this dog toy company because they did a dog toy that looked like a Jack Daniels bottle, something about a dog, old number 2 on the carpet or whatever. And that was headline news as well this week. Why? Do not ask me. I swear they're trying to dumb everyone down. Or I think it's a bit of both. I think they're trying to do shock and awe tactics as well, because they want to prepare the world for a different world that we're moving into. So maybe we are going to see more brutality in the world. We're already seeing it now. And I think we're probably going to see a lot more as this war rages on as well, and as we enter new wars. You've got to remember, human beings haven't really changed that much all throughout history. They're still the same people. We just like to think we're more civilized. But you take away people's food for a few days, and then you'll see just how civilized your next door neighbor is. That posh, oh yes, hello, hello. Give it a few days of him without food, and let's see how he reacts after that. All right, well, I think that is about it. Now I'm going to go for a swim. Got some really nice swimming just over here. So I'm going to go for a swim now, and I'll get back and edit this video. Thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care. God bless you guys, and God bless your family. And I'll see you next week now.